What do you know, on this sleigh ride, we're no more started than one of the sleighs. Bill, that is, buys a root beer stand. So we swing in and order up a frosty black cow. You know, after all, it's summer and we're hot and tired. And Bill tackles this cool, tasty beverage with plenty of interest. Paper mill country, Mosinee. We're traveling light this trip through north-central Wisconsin, Rothschild and Marathon corporations, products which have placed Wisconsin at least on the paper map, no pun intended. And in the resort area, imagine the tourist dilemma. You can choose the Wildcat Lodge or the Princess Pine Cottages, the Rocky Reef Resort or the Sheltered Bay Resort. While we're bent on a look-see at northeastern Canada and the New England states, let's not miss a bit whether it's a peaceful view of pine tree-circled lakes or a chance to just sit in the sun and fish. Northern Wisconsin has it too. Leaving familiar northern Wisconsin, let's watch the road map and markers more carefully. U.S. Highway 2 leads to Manistee from Escanaba. Then traveling north and east, it's Sault Ste. Marie, some miles ahead. From the hills on which part of the city of Sault Ste. Marie is built, we look down on Canadian Algoma steel mills and on the St. Mary's River approach to the locks. The campus of Michigan College of Mining and Technology is located on the site and the buildings in the former Fort Brady. Here the military parade grounds have become the athletic field. Waseguan, which means rapid waters, peers out over the fast-flowing currents of St. Mary's River, never dreaming of the U.S. locks, now barred to cameramen, nor of ocean-going liners which visit the homes of his ancestors. From the ferry, only distant views of the famous Soo Locks can be obtained. Midstream, we pass a ferry boat bound for U.S. soil, and now we near Canadian soil, our good neighbor to the north. Well, let's be on our way in Maple Leaf country, the rapids of the Ausable River, as we travel along the King's Highway number 17 in Ontario. You wouldn't call them mountains, but the blacktop roads wind over, well, let's call them substantial hills anyway, to Ottawa. Breakfast wasn't more than over an hour ago, but you know the appetite of a young growing boy. The King's Highway number 17 has led us to Canada's national capital at Ottawa. In 1858, Queen Victoria chose Ottawa as the site of the government, and today Parliament is housed in a building rebuilt after a fire in 1916. The Peace Tower rises 293 feet into the air. From this tower, Canada's greatest carillon of 53 bells peals forth. Like many of the world's capitals, Ottawa has been gradually spreading over its hills located high above the waters of the river from which it got its name. The Capitol buildings, now policed by the world-famous red-coated Mounties, were built on a hill discovered as early as 1613 by Champlain. The rather monotonous duties of directing traffic and posing for tourist cameras does not seem to alter the temperament nor the amiable disposition of these smart, colorful officers of the North, who have built an international reputation for getting their man. This is the seat, the home of the Royal Mounties. Built as it is along the river that bears its name, Ottawa is a city of promise with unrivaled water power potentials. Now a city of some 20,000, Ottawa boasts of year-round sports and one of the finest convention hotels, the Chateau Laurier. Many of the buildings, including the post office, are roofed with copper. The central block of Parliament is flanked by the east and west blocks. The Rideau Canal connects with the Ottawa River. Built originally as a military work by Royal Engineers, it seems amusing nowadays to think that this waterway was intended for British gunboats. The canal depth is only about 8 feet from the St. Lawrence into Lake Ontario. The canal provided the gunboats, then apparently small craft, an alternate route so as not to be subject to guns on American shores along the international section of the St. Lawrence. The canal building in 1826 followed the bitter war of 1812, a war that poisoned relations between Canadians and Americans. This absurd measure of defense seemed quite reasonable when built by the British government at a cost of $4 million. Pleasure boats use the hand-operated canal locks and gates today. Built originally on the advice of the famous Duke of Wellington, and the peaceful Canadian-U.S. relations continue. The Chateau Laurier, some 500 rooms and adequate for sizable conventions. The road from Ottawa to Montreal winds you much and reminds you of southeastern Wisconsin, towns comparable to Palmyra and Eagle. Small farms of perhaps 50 to 100 acres, gently rolling land. The largest city in Canada and the seventh in America, Montreal is the greatest inland port in the world. Population, about 1.5 million. Canadian steamships, ocean-going vessels that transport grain, pinpoint the fact that Montreal is the world's greatest grain shipping seaport. Moving into view is a history-making vessel, built to not only ride the waves and weather of the Atlantic. This post-war Model 2 will on this trip negotiate the canals and inland waterways with stops in Detroit, Chicago, and Milwaukee, discharging cargo and picking it up as it goes. Yes, the Anna Maria, on the very day your cameraman shot these pictures, was being photographed by the newsreel and TV cameras, since it is marking the end of an era when all ocean-going vessels transferred their cargoes in Montreal to smaller ships for the inland trip. The Anna Maria, on this first voyage to inland ports, is carrying cargo for many inland cities, ports which will receive the goods 2 to 3 weeks sooner than under the old method, requiring the transfer of the entire cargo to another boat at Montreal. Clearly stenciled on the boxes, made in Germany, a 6-ton shipment of delicate chinaware is consigned to a dealer in Montreal. As soon as this order is unloaded, the Anna Maria will continue through the Lachine Canal from the St. Lawrence into Lake Ontario, and thence to Detroit and Chicago, a trip never before made by ocean-going vessels. Yes, even today, Milwaukee will be visited by this new type of post-World War II vessel, and you may be sure it will open a new era in the commerce of this nation. Markets are always colorful, but to realize that in this northern area in early July, local farmers have produced in such short time a wide variety of garden products. Why, you'd think the sun had been working 24 hours a day. Now, wouldn't you? How's this? Lettuce, beans, carrots, radishes, and cauliflower, raised 50 miles north of Montreal and on the market early in July. Colorful, aren't they? Notre Dame Church, duplicate of the one in Paris, sitting in standing room 10,000 people. From West Mountain, Montreal, built on an island and surrounded by the St. Lawrence River and the Riviera Prairie, or the Back River, stretches along the St. Lawrence. Montreal University. All of the teaching, all of the speaking here is in French. West Mountain, our guide called this the city of the wealthy English-speaking class. Florist Arthur Campbell spent $25,000 here. Mr. Zeller of 5, 10, and 15-cent store fame invited us to take a look-see at what his national stores have made it possible for him to enjoy. And Ruth accepts his hospitality. Sherbrooke Street, the 5th Avenue of Montreal. Here in buildings once fine homes, the smart shops are located. Dress shops like the Theodora and many others, expensive curio and antique shops. Many shopkeepers specialize, the Aladdin, in Oriental design. The large French Salve will take 275 Canadian dollars, while the pair of antique beauties represent $265. Officer Latendre in smart white cap and gloves, a typical traffic officer. One of the oldest and finest apartment houses in Montreal, located on Sherbrooke Street, as is the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, headquarters of the Hollywood stars when stopping in Montreal. Maurice Chevalier, Shirley Temple, Bing Crosby, you know them. The cigarette find finds numerous strange brands. Winchester, McDonald, Sweet Castle, Claire, all at 37 cents. American cigarettes are 48 cents a pack. And for those who can afford, the American cigarette is always preferred. Sun Life Building, largest office building in the entire British Dominion. Certainly the most imposing in Montreal. Sheraton Hotel System's new Laurentian Hotel located on Dominion Square, and the ageless Windsor Hotel located right down the street. Here is the home of royalty. Prime ministers and presidents stay here when stopping in Montreal. Dominion Square, during their noon hour or in the twilight of life, just sitting. Robert Burns' statement, so applicable to Canadian-U.S. relations. It's coming it for all that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that. Just out of Quebec, the St. Lawrence River is not as wide as many visualize, but plenty deep, deep enough for ocean-going vessels and freighters. And now from Montreal to Quebec is just but a few miles, but don't plan on driving it in record speed. To the fort, the Gibraltar of North America. Okay. Quebec during the summer season of each year. Wolf's Cove, also famous in the history of campaigns of Quebec, is now the dock for the passenger ships. South out of Quebec along Highway 23, the transformation from peaceful farms to rolling, rugged Maine is immediately apparent at the border. From Quebec to the border and across Maine to Bar Harbor, you won't forget the scenery, nor the rolling, twisting highways either. Natives explained the houses were joined to the summer kitchens, to the woodsheds, to the barns, to make farm chores possible in the deep snows of the winter. Approaching the Maine coast, long finger-like bays look deserted at low tide. Rudy Vallee publicized Maine in the 20s with the famous Maine Stein song. Not included, though, were references to these beautiful coves, beaches, pines, and sails. Actually, Bar Harbor, Maine, is a village located on a rocky coast of an island. To those who have visited this island, the beauties of coastal waters and sailboats poking their masts into the blue sky, or boat bathers near the Hotel Bar Harbor, is comparable to other regions. But move out a bit, visit Acadia National Park, and drive out along the many carefully graded blacktop roadways, or visit the tremendous sandy bathing beach just a few miles from downtown Bar Harbor. Visit after visit will bring to your eyes the glories of Maine's rocky shores found only in Maine. Pine trees along Otter Point, which lead to Otter Cove, and more pine trees framing the surf at work. Pine trees everywhere, allowing the camera enthusiast to frame his efforts at capturing the ocean, the waves, and the rocks. Blackwoods Road past Otter Bay, from one of the numerous mountains in Acadia National Park, the entire island, rocky shores, small bays and reefs, as well as the town of Bar Harbor itself, may be viewed in an area subject to that terrible forest fire just a few years ago. The little town of Bar Harbor, located on the island, is typical of New England towns, with clean, orderly streets, cottage running west and east, while Main Street points north to the harbor itself. And for delightful beverages, shore dinners, just good food, as in Palm Beach, too, it's Testa's. Joe Testa, a friend of many years, explains that all of the foods of the deep, whether one of the many types of fish, lobster, oysters, or other seafood, must be fresh and kept under careful refrigeration. While capturing these shots, we suggested that the fish be hurried back to the refrigerator, to which Joe replied, "If you kept on shooting all day long, these delicacies would still be better than those found in average inland restaurants." But whether it's at Testa's or out of doors, it's lobster in Maine. People drive for miles to these outdoor lobster cookers. It's a picnic-style arrangement. You buy the lobster by the pound, no charge for the cooking, and as soon as the sea giant shows up in his red dress, the family gathers around the picnic benches, also provided by the management, and your picnic begins. Mother has packed some plates, potato chips, and relishes, and that's all you need. Save a big appetite. This family of four, up from Boston to enjoy a lobster picnic in Maine. And you know, as you prepare for the feast, that your appetite will mount, and when the rich, soft lobster meat and the melted butter reach the lips, yes, This is a lobster picking Maine style, and Shirley Merrill enjoys it. Any questions? Across Maine through Vermont and New Hampshire to Burlington building at Augusta hasn't particularly set the style for other capital buildings of our nation. The break at the boundary between Maine and New Hampshire is definite. White birch trees line the roads for miles in the Gorham area. Picturesque covered bridges remind you of paintings on calendars. At least this bridge is one still doing business. In New Hampshire's White Mountains, birch trees provide the frame for the distant peaks, hung low in clouds. And near Crawford Notch, New Hampshire, these closely grouped granite peaks gather more and more halos of disappointment for the outdoor vacationist. Here and there, the blue sky has short, live victory in the battle of Crawford Notch between sky, clouds, and mountain peaks. Bretton Woods and the Hotel Mount Washington have long ago left ink on the vacationist's map. And with the publicity managers like President Ike, the golf game takes another surge forward, while the sky continues as a battleground, and the sun makes an attempt to score. The Vermont countryside in July is perhaps not too different from Wisconsin until you travel through it. Of course, the state is much smaller, its farms smaller and perhaps neater. But to us, the rolling hills and mountains and ever-turning roads spelled the difference. Small lakes, often referred to officially as ponds, are quite as numerous as in northern Wisconsin or Minnesota. Yes, definitely, to us it was the mountains, rolling tree-covered mountains and neat farmlands that mark the state of Vermont and raise it to travelers as worthy of many a look-see. And if you were wondering, yes, the buildings are still all hooked together here, the same as they were in New Hampshire and Maine. Smaller than many state houses, the Capitol building at Montpelier is nonetheless splendid as its gold-covered dome points into the sky of the land of maple syrup and sugar. Right next door, the home of the National Life Insurance Company, a conservative, well-managed institution. And how about a look at the older homes of Vermont? White, green trim, and just as they have been pictured for you in story, poem, and song. But today the traveler has placed a premium on hotel space, and many an old Vermont family helps balance the budget with tourist rooms, so the cameraman has to seek one out that's not blanketed with rooms to let signs. 1791 marked the founding of the University of Vermont. And now, according to the map, you will notice that we are traveling, or rather we have traveled to Burlington, and from Burlington we are on our way to Niagara Falls. Of course, this youngster, Bill, is still hungry. This time it's a drink. Yes, he's an old guzzler. And now into New York State, let's get a close-up of some cherries. And then, of course, grapes. And now into Niagara Falls country. Looking down on the foam and the rapids. And then, of course, the whirlpool. So well publicized, and the car travels across the cables from one shore to the other. Whirlpool, you've heard of it. And now watch the car. All the way across the whirlpool. And here she comes again. There's a lot to see at Niagara Falls. Some of the time it's pretty wet. Sightseers enjoy this stuff. Rushing, surging power of this great American falls. Terrific mists developed by this rushing water. And now on the Canadian side, looking across toward the American side. Let's take a look-see at the Great Welland Canal, the ship canal. Here the gates open and close regularly for ships moving through the Great Lakes. Unlike the locks we saw at the Soo at the Saw at the Sea, Soo at the Sow. No, unlike the locks we saw at the Soo, these are unguarded. We could stay here as long as we liked. Watch these ships from all over the various countries. Yes, Tom, Bill, and Ruth, Norm, we'll never forget these ships. And then from the 18th floor of the Royal York, south over Canada, a pan of the railroad yards and the harbor. Billings Library, ivy-covered red stone, an institution of higher learning dating back many, many years. A historic date, in fact, 1776. Yes, only 15 years after 76, and the university opened its doors. But the buildings have been added from time to time. The modern chapel sends its tower into the ageless sky. The red brick, massive, older type of building closes our views of the University of Vermont campus. Fort Ticonderoga is claimed by some as New York's most historic spot, but it would seem that the motion picture Fort Ty added an assist and has swept this little town and its fort into the sightseer's lap. Tree-lined blacktop roads lead past numerous tablets. This one, for example, erected by the Society of the Colonial Wars, topped by the eagle, of course. Duplicates of the Colonial Army uniforms are worn by the college students working as parking boys during the vacation period. The Log House Souvenir and Official Entry Building is the only modern note in the fort area. Though you may not be a student of history, the spending by France of a fortune on this works, which was occupied only from 1755 to 1781, a little over 25 years, might be considered by some even today as an extravagance. Yet here much of the history of the U.S. turned. Busy, busy turnstiles at Fort Ty. Through this entrance, the Place d'Armes have passed such great men as George Washington, Ben Franklin, Benedict Arnold, Ethan Allen. Even the seasoned traveler will get a certain thrill out of standing in the shadow of such great men or recounting silently the impact of this entry to the Place d'Armes. The strength of the walls of stone and the power, at least, at that time of these countless guns. Beyond this wall, the French had constructed a stockade village on the shores of Lake Champlain. Well, there's rows and rows of guns here. They represented a costly trip from the old world at that time. Yes, relics of a titanic struggle between the then great nations of the world for a piece of this new world. Built of stone and topped with slate, the roof of the Place d'Armes today houses a museum. Much of the area spelled the beginning of a century today as the world's most powerful nations. From a peaceful countryside to guns, mortar, stone, and the Place d'Armes, here at Fort Ty on Lake Champlain in New York State is a powerful memory of colonial strife and gallantry. Yes, even today, cows graze peacefully in the shadows of such an historic spot. And we travel on, around, and look over gun barrels into the clouds and the blue sky and that great American flag. And then we move on into the Lake George area. Today, the clouds are hanging low as we look into the various rock formations surrounding Lake George in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State. Yes, roads, water, mountains in the Lake George area of upstate New York. Pine trees, blue skies, more trees, and more blue sky. And the Royal York Hotel, largest in the British Empire. Yes, this Royal York Hotel with the bronze tablet, visited by the great. And then to the financial section of Toronto, looking north toward the City Hall. The City Hall, and then the corner of King and Bay Streets, the heart of the financial district. On four corners, the Bank of Toronto, the Bank of Nova Scotia, the Bank of Montreal, and the Imperial Bank of Canada. This is truly the financial district, with four banks competing with each other on each of the corners, and the unusual old iron gates of Osgoode Hall, built so people can get in, but so cattle cannot get in. It goes back many days to the time cattle roamed the streets. Of course, the canna flowers, beautiful at this time of the year, and then the City Hall, and down to where the great are welcomed. The kings and the queens visit the empire and are welcomed here. University Avenue, towards the Provincial Parliament Building. Mary Pickford, the great cinema star, was born on this street. And this is the site of the hospital for the sick children, 1,700 beds. And, of course, the tower of the Parliament buildings, British flag flying overhead. Unusual and wonderful. These Parliament buildings give you that old world atmosphere. You would actually think that you were in England if you were not surrounded by all of these nice Canadian people. And their beautiful flowers. Even the short summers here bring forth these flowers around the entrance to the Parliament building. Trinity College on the University of Toronto campus. Many nice buildings here on this university campus. Among them, the Hart House, University of Toronto Tower, and the Memorial Chapel Tower. Well, we're going to leave this part of the country now, and we're going out on a ferry to pull away from the shoreline. As we travel across the lake, we see Mackinac Island shoreline in the distance. We're traveling on the ferry City of Sheboygan, almost like Sheboygan, only spelled Cheboygan. Smokestacks indicate we're puffing right along. This is quite a trip. The people sit around on the decks and look out, and then a brother ferry passes, people watching and getting all the ideas they can of this trip. Even a speedboat passes off the starboard deck. Now we're on the way to St. Ignatz. Another ferry is passing us as we continue on to the north shore of one of these great lakes. And then a few miscellaneous shots in the